Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever this podcast may find you. As always, Gavin.
And I, Justin.
And we are, I'm just dropping this in where I was talking about some film cameras and how I'm a complete dingleberry. Last night, was it last night or this morning, I got the email back from Essential Photo Supply here in Salt Lake City, where that's the place I send my film to. I buy film from them sometimes.
Okay.
But I send them off to develop and scan. And I just got my scans back this morning. And they just send you a Dropbox link with all the files. And I actually posted them on my Facebook. I didn't know which roll I had in which camera until I shot everything. So these are shot for those that are into film photography. These are shot on black and white Ilford HP5 black and white film, and that's the film that got me started in film photography when I was doing it in when I went to community college. There was a class I had to take cinematography. That was just a photography class.
Yeah,
and the first half of that photography class was film. And we not only took photos on film, but we had to develop film in a dark room, and I fucking hated it. Absolutely detest it to this day. I will happily pay somebody else the $9 to develop it. Because, it's just a massive pain and super stressful. And I'd just rather take the joy in capturing photos and, have someone someone else that can do it properly knows how to do it.
Oh yeah,
and they do like a really good job on just the quality of the scan and the quality of the development, and like they have a good eye for that, and they can control highlights and shadows and like that kind of stuff. There can be variance in between developers, or depending on who you go to, but yeah, no, I like those guys, and I actually just posted photos. I don't know what, did you pull them up?
I'm not logged into Facebook on here.
Oh, gotcha. I thought that when I mentioned that, I saw you type it, so I thought that's what you were doing.
But I think it's funny. I have a funny film story real quick. So my high school that I went to was built in 2006, so it was fairly new and fairly remodeled. The funny thing is, that was probably one of the last high schools built that actually had a darkroom built into the school, because 2006 was real close.
That was after the digital camera started to really become the thing.
Yep.
It was before DSLRs could do video.
And
so it was in this like weird gray area where like film was becoming out of style. Digital was becoming more of a thing, but we didn't really know how much digital would become the thing. That was the year the fucking iPhone came out. So
I know. Well, and then the best part was 4 years later when I started going to high school there, the actual film photography stuff was already gone. The darkroom was there, but they had, I think, 2 years earlier.
You graduated in, 2013?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I started attending there in 2010, and by that point, they had already ceased using the darkroom that they just built a couple of years earlier because of how quickly that whole revolution happened right there.
Well, it's funny because I was taking a film photography class in 2014.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but that's college versus high school level. High school level.
Well, I still had to take film photography in order to take video, like production.
Yeah.
Like it seemed kind of like, what the fuck are we doing? But yeah.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how much like some of those might have changed a little bit at this point.
Well, I'm sure Slick still has their stuff, and especially now that, film photography is trendy.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping on the bandwagon.
I'm sure the class still exists. It just makes you wonder if it's still like a requirement or not.
I'm sure it is.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But either way, no, kind of fun.
But that's what I've been up to and doing. I wanted to get this problem sorted before I head up to Sun Valley this week. By the time you're hearing this in a couple of days, I'll be heading up to Boise first to kind of start off my trip. The idea for the trip is to drive from Boise through the Sawtooth Mountain Range.
Okay.
Which is, and you can look it up on Google, it's 195 miles of squiggles. It's incredible. I'm so excited because actually, this is another reason to own a fun car, not just drive other people's fun cars. Because I just get to take my car and have this insane adventure by myself. There's going to be an option for you to go the normal way.
Naturally.
Yes. If you put Boise and then go from Boise to Stanley, that should help.
Stanley, Idaho. I've heard many talks about the Sawtooths and the fun of it.
Yeah, I did a photo shoot of a McLaren Senna,
Mm-hmm.
technically in the Sawtooth. It was just like the part of the road that was just above Sun Valley.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really go that far into them because we had a McLaren Senna. And that was just, yeah.
So I'm guessing is this the one you were talking about, or is that route that it chose the one you're talking about?
Oh, the one that I thought it was going to take you to was going to be the boring way, but no, that's where I'm going.
That's kind of what I figured. I saw all the squiggles. Yeah, no, that looks fantastic. 2 hours, 40 minutes.
Oh wait, actually, or was I going to go into Idaho City? I can't remember. I guess I have options. But the part that so if you go from drag it to the right too, like just drag the map. Okay, yeah, so from there, interesting. Okay, add another stop to it, of just like Haley, HAI. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
So the boring way would be coming down and going on the 20 over. And then,
through
and then up.
Hill City and Fairfield and like Mountain Home and stuff.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's gonna be in the Fiesta. Tires are good, brakes are good.
Gas is expensive, but fortunately, you're driving a Fiesta.
Yeah, I don't normally do this, but I toggled my my trip computer to just do instant fuel economy, and I had my speed set to, like, the gearing in that car is kind of stupid for 6th gear. It should be taller.
Yep.
80 miles an hour is like 31 or 200. So like 3,000 RPM is like 77 miles an hour or so. But I had cruise control set to that from Salt Lake up here to Syracuse. And I was hanging out in the middle 30s.
Yeah.
And then there'd be a little hill, and I'd like crest into the 20s. And then that hill would subside, and I'd go up into the 40s. So, like, honestly, the amount of boxes that car can check is pretty astounding for, like, how well it can do both fuel economy and fun driving and take some things and, you know, still be good to drive and chuck in the corners and stuff. So, yeah. And the reason why I'm going to Sun Valley is the Tour de Force is happening. So this is where the Tour de Force is basically an event held by the city and by the local police department, and they shut down a road. If you zoom in, actually, closer to Haley, let's zoom out a bit. So go north. Yeah, it's up above Sun Valley. Well, there's a straight road where it says 75. Zoom in. This doesn't matter for our listeners, but matters for our conversation.
Yeah.
That straight bit that's like in between the two 75s.
Gotcha.
They closed that road down, and this is where cars like Bugattis and Koenigseggs and crazy Lambos and Vipers, twin turbo Vipers, and Singer 911s come out and do top speed runs. So the last that I was aware of, the newest record was held by a Chiron.
Unsurprisingly.
And I think it cracked off like a 263. Jeez. This is on a public road, and it's not that smooth. This is like, for those that are local to Utah, it's kind of like the road quality of the road that goes behind East Canyon by the reservoir.
Okay, so
but with a couple of bumps though, like there's a couple of cracks in this road too. Like It's not great. It's not the road that you look at and you think, oh yeah, people do 250 plus on here. Like no. But it's long and straight, and there's a corner that's actually involved here, and like there are driver meetings of like, okay, you have to take this at no more than 125, and like they close the road off. This is during the day, so like they'll close it for a period.
Yep.
Cars do runs, and then they'll open it up to traffic because traffic does go through there, like a little bit at least. And so they'll run traffic through there for like a period and then close it again and do another few runs. Yeah. So that's what's going on. There will be a car show up there as well, that all the cars that, run in the thing, I mean, this is like the upper 1% of the upper 1%, go out and do this kind of thing.
Yeah, this is big status. I mean, like you said, the year the Senna came out, you saw a Senna there.
Well, not only that, but like I had it I was fortunate enough that I was able to call our buddy James.
Yep.
And be like, hey, man, what are you up to? And he's like, oh, I'm going to go shoot a Senna. And I'm like, oh,
okay.
Can I tag along? And so we had our own photo shoot of a $2 million McLaren Senna up in, the Sawtooths, and that was an incredible experience. But, like, there's stuff like, Lamborghini SVJs everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You're tripping over 993 911s and 964 911s partially because the Singer graveyard is up there, which is really surreal to see this this square parking lot that is filled with rundown 964 911s that are like automatics or 4-wheel drives or both or like some cabrios.
Yeah.
And they're just, so those are the cars that Singer uses. They just collect them there for their builds. So that's kind of a neat thing to see too. But I mean, this is a thing where like you see Porsche 550 spiders, I guess.
Okay.
Running around town, like that's a $4 to $5 million car.
Yep.
Bugattis, Lamborghinis, Ferrari, like anything. So yeah, that's going to be quite the interesting experience. I will possibly record a podcast on my own up there because that interferes with the days that we do this.
Yeah.
Unless we want to record something like on a Wednesday before, but
well, we'll see. I think
we have stuff to do.
Yeah.
So. But until next time, that's what I'm going to be up to.
Yeah, and I personally am not going to be doing anything terribly interesting over this next week. I did attend a car show yesterday, and we were going to talk a little bit about that. So it was it's a local diner in the town I grew up in, Kaysville, and it was a couple years ago bought by a gentleman who's my brother's best friend's dad. And he bought it to keep it local because the family that had originally started it, there was always great food, but there was a lot of back-end management problems, and like the older lady that originally started it, her younger kids that were helping her run it started taking advantage of it. And at some point, there was even one of the kids living in the back of the place. Lots of weird stuff that you wouldn't have necessarily known on the forefront, but on the back end was problematic business-wise. So my friend's dad bought it, or brother's friend's dad bought it, and kept it local, and he's been slowly kind of turning it around, changing things, and he's deciding to start doing a car show there. And so he did kind of the first iteration of that, and kind of just as a test, didn't really advertise it very much, just to see what would show up. Naturally, a lot of the typical elderly gentleman car show crowd showed up.
Well,
and that's not a bad thing.
No, and how I've kind of voiced my perspective to you before about this part of at least this part of Davis County, but this part of Utah especially, is kind of our own slice of the Midwest.
Yeah.
Not just with cars, but with people and the landscape and just the culture up here is a lot, like Davis County is definitely different than I would think Utah County is in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
I mean, clearly different than Salt Lake County. Salt Lake is, the liberal oasis within the state of Utah.
Basically.
Park City a little bit too, but really more Salt Lake. It's just a metropolitan area. That's just what happens when you add more people. There's a higher likelihood of actual diversity.
Yeah.
Even within, the whiteness of Utah. But anyways, as you were saying, a lot of winga-dingas up there.
Yeah, so a few cool things showed up. There was a 2-door first-gen Suburban Woody wagon, which was kind of cool. There was supposed to be a Suzuki Swift on tracks that was supposed to show up.
Alan, where are you?
I know, it didn't end up making it. There was a 1,000-horsepower Cummins-swapped Chevy K5 Blazer, because
that needed to be a thing that exists.
There was a Dodge Daytona. I forgot to mention. I mentioned this car to Gavin before. There was a Dodge Daytona IROC, like an IROC edition, because IROC is not. Although people associate that with IROC Camaros, that was a race series. So that car was a homologated race car.
Okay, so when you said. Okay, so this thing that I'm looking at here is not the thing that I pictured when you said a Dodge Daytona.
Oh, okay.
I mean, maybe we're seeing different things. Can you throw up what you're seeing on the screen here?
No, we're seeing the same thing, I'm sure.
Okay, so open a new tab and look up Dodge Daytona.
Boop. Okay, you were okay.
That's why I said, is it real? That's probably at least $250,000 car.
No.
I don't know what the fuck this other thing is.
No, that's a Dodge Daytona. Like that's the Dodge Daytona I more knew about.
I think you might be the minority there.
I probably am, but it's for some context, it's a '90s Dodge Daytona.
This is not in the U.S. market's heyday.
No, it's not. But anyways, it was there. They're rare.
I don't want to downplay what this is.
Yeah.
I just don't know even what this is.
Yeah, it was like a 90. It was a 92, so it was like this.
What engine is in this?
I believe, if I recall correctly, they are. Oh, fine. I believe they are a V6.
Naturally aspirated or turbo
or no, sorry, 2.2 16 valve inline 4. So turbocharged. So turbocharged 2.2. Okay, that's what it was.
So it's practically the same as your car.
I know, right? No. But yeah, very. It's still front wheel drive and stuff, but they're, according to the owner, they're relatively rare, but they're not extraordinarily valuable.
What color was this one?
It was red.
It was red, okay.
Yeah, so it was like that first one I pulled up.
Uh-huh.
In beautiful condition. He was the original owner, had the original window sticker, everything like that. Like
this could do well at Radwood.
Oh, it definitely could. It was 100% perfect Radwood material. So there was that. There was two really. I love it when like things that were just pulled out of the barn show up to these things, because like there was both a '66 Beetle,
cool,
that like was so gutted. Like,
oh really?
There was not. I don't even think there was a bit of paint left on it. Like,
whoa,
that you could really see.
I wonder if Andrew has shot that car.
And the tires were even guaranteed to be the ones that it sat on for all those years, which to me is a no-no. But whatever.
Oh well, 100%. Yeah.
And it hadn't even. It had older, what are they called? Older big center hub wheels that most people have converted off of those to be able to put regular wheels on.
Sure.
It had like the rear seat was gone from probably mice eating it over the years.
Wow.
But it drove there on its own. Same with, there was also a Corvair that was in about the same condition.
Oh, that's cool.
So that was really cool.
Yeah.
And then there was a Dodge Durango Hellcat.
Okay.
That was named by the license plate the Heck Cat, because of course it is, because
we're in Utah.
And then at that point there was, my dad brought his Saab 900 turbo convertible. I brought my Saab 900 SPG. My brother brought his Saab 95 Aero. So we had our normal Saab crew there. Plus Carson brought his Mark V R32.
Yeah.
His friend brought his Merkur XR4 Ti.
That I've tried to drive that. Well, not tried to drive it. I tried to pull it in his garage once.
It's fun.
No, no, it is not.
It is a horrendous clutch.
That is actually, in my experience, the most difficult clutch I've ever driven.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it took me quite a while.
And you drive semi trucks.
Yes. That clutch was next level stupid.
Yeah.
And then there was also a 1953 Suburban. Anyways, like I said, lots of older stuff. And so he basically did this just to see what would show up if there was minimal advertising.
Sure.
And it turned out pretty good. And they even had sponsors and gave away a Traeger and a few other things from the sponsors. But he's going to do it again next year. But next year he's going to actually push to advertise it, being that it actually functioned even without huge advertising.
Yeah.
So he's going to try to push it a little further.
Cool.
That was the first car show, not Cars and Coffee not included.
Yeah,
that I've been to in a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
And
well, what was the last car show you went to before that?
I have to think deep here.
Is it after Salze?
I've been to some after Salze.
Okay.
I think I've definitely been to some since 2020. They've kind of slipped my mind. I don't regularly attend them, though.
I mean, I don't either.
Oh, no. Peach Days last year.
You went to Peach Days?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Peach Days last year, I went up there mainly because a lot of other people had gone up there, and it just happened to be one of those miracles where a late Saturday I happened to be free, which is rare.
That is rare.
And so I ended up there with my car and with, like, Carson's car, the one I just mentioned, the Mark V R32, and quite a few others.
Cool.
Which Peach Days is really cool, mainly because it takes the the Winga-Dinga crowd, but it's the upper echelon of that. So there's a lot of the really nice high-end builds that, fully chromed out, really polished, stuff like that. That's like extremely well done. And those were all there. And then, of course, great for me, there was a bunch of semi-trucks there, too, so that was cool. So I think that was actually probably the last car show I went to.
I just have this visual of you frolicking through this like row of semis.
I'm just like walking down, Camaro. I'm just like, Camaro, Mustang. Oh my God, a Peterbilt, and just start running.
Well, to be fair, the Peterbilts would be more interesting than just another Mustang or another Camaro.
Yeah. It's actually funny. One of the other cars that was there at the car show yesterday was a Bel Air that was really cool. The dude
was it teal and white?
No.
Okay, finally, Jesus.
No, this one, not only was the car a little more unique, but the dude was too. It was a two-door Bel Air, and he's owned it since 76. It's been repainted twice, but other than that, he hasn't swapped it. It's the original straight six, not a V8.
Cool.
So, like, it's all the stuff to the car's original, despite the fact it's been restored a couple times.
Yeah. I mean, it's another 57 Bel Air. Like,
it is. This was actually an earlier one. This was a 55.
Oh, okay.
So it was an earlier one, but it had all the chrome kitted out, and it was painted a little different where his two-tone split was in a different spot. You could very well tell.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. Huh. But he was really cool about it because
what was the color scheme?
It was a dark maroon metallic with, like, cream white.
Ooh, that's interesting.
It was a lovely spec.
Yeah.
I actually really liked it. And that's why I went to talk to him, and he was super cool about it because he enjoyed the fact that his Bel Air didn't fit in with the crowd, and I just appreciated the fact that he was really honest about the fact that the car's not worth a ton because there's a billion Bel Airs.
Yeah.
They're actually
they're not special.
No, they're the entry level. If you want to collect a '50s collector car, that's what you go for.
Yeah,
because they are. We'll bring up the Miata complex again. They're the Miata complex of the collector cars of that era.
Of that, yeah. I mean, if you are just some random rich guy, and if you feel like you need to check a box of a car from the 50s, it's either that or a C1 Corvette, really.
Yeah, and they're everywhere. And so we talked for a minute about how, basically any part for those is reproduced. It's so easy to restore them and stuff like that. But it's just refreshing to not only see the car that is restored with an owner that understands that although the car's cool, he was perfectly fine with people sitting in it and whatnot. He didn't feel like it had to be protected in a bubble. Mm-hmm. And that's just refreshing, especially when the car is technically not that special, although cool, but not that unique that you need to just protect it with, within an inch of your life.
There is no need to try to preserve a 50s Bel Air.
No, plenty of people are already doing it, and so therefore it's not rare.
And people have been doing it too for a long time. There's nothing. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm talking shit on Bel Airs either.
They're really cool cars, and there's a reason that they are as popular as they are to be that collector car.
I mean, if we're talking about cars that define a decade, right? And this could be a fun game that we can play, actually. I mean, for the 50s, it is the Bel Air. For the 60s, it's probably the Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah.
Even though that was a car that at that point had been made for 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
The 70s was not great.
I'd say 70s you'd almost have to split in half. 75 and earlier, you would probably be... the difficulty is most of the desirable muscle cars of that era are the 69s.
Right. There are Chevelles, probably, and Novas.
And a lot of the Boss Mustangs, actually, were in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm. Mach 1.
Mach 1, 302, 351, and 429, all those Bosses.
But if we're talking about, one car to define, a decade, I mean, there's not anything that really jumps out because there's, from 75 onward, was pure garbage. Genuinely.
Yeah, and you could almost think, actually, here's one for the later 70s, you could really almost think of the large boat Cadillacs, because did
Fleetwoods start in the 70s?
They did. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the Fleetwoods had two different generations in the 70s, and the earlier ones were the really long 500 cubic inch, the big ones.
Yeah.
And then they got chopped towards the end of the 70s to shorten them down. So as a bad example, but a good example for the era, you could think that second generation of Fleetwood where it got kind of mangled and really distorted as to what it was.
Yeah, and then the 80s would be Countach, Testarossa, 930 Turbo.
Yep.
Like that kind of stuff. 90s What would be a car to define the 90s?
That's a difficult one. I mean, you could say there's a bunch of answers, especially because this is the era we know well.
Sure.
NSX, Miata.
Well, Miata, yeah, maybe.
I could see McLaren F1.
I was thinking McLaren F1.
I could see
Diablo.
Yep. Late 90s, I could see,
And the early and late 90s are also two different things, too.
Mhm.
Two very different design eras.
I could see R33 or 34 GTR.
Yeah, potentially. Supra. A90 Supra. Or A80 Supra.
First gen Eclipse, even. I mean, to certain crowds, like that's a very iconic car of that era.
And what I'm trying to think about is, like, not just within car guys, but, like, just the world. Like, the kind of reach that the Bel Air had or the Beetle had.
Yep.
It had nothing to do with automotive enthusiasm, especially the Beetle.
No, it had everything to do with, it's a car that does a task well.
Transporting people and just keeping the world moving.
You could, you could almost say, like, technically they did start in the 80s. However, they got extraordinarily prevalent in the 90s. The Dodge Grand Caravan.
That's true, actually.
Because the second gen, the bubbly Dodge Grand Caravan, is everywhere,
and they're still around. They're still running around. I would, because it did start in the 80s as that more boxy one. You could buy like a turbocharged all-wheel drive manual one.
Yep.
Very rare.
Yep.
But they do exist. The minivan actually, just period, makes a lot of sense. That and, the first-gen Ford Exploder.
Yes. Yeah. And even I believe it would be like the third and fourth gen Civics of that era were also extremely prevalent everywhere.
Well, that's when they finally got good for like the masses at least to appreciate, as far as being reliable, getting good miles a gallon. I mean, that's really started with the CRX.
Yep.
But with eras and societies and people just adopting things. I mean, we adopt things a lot quicker now than we used to.
Yep.
But it took society like a longer time to like really realize the brilliance of Honda and like Honda's engineering. And, Civic SIs from that era as well are massively appreciating because they, lasted like, or not the last of, but like an era where they really made like great driving, great shifting, great steering, buzzy, naturally aspirated, high revving 4-cylinders. So,
then comes the early 2000, like the 2000 to 2010,
and that is a harder one to kind of put a finger on, because that was an era where a lot of great cars actually came out. I mean, the Chevy LS came out in the late 90s. The first thing that pops to my head is either like the C6 Corvette, maybe, possibly, or I don't know. I mean, just so many great cars from so many great countries came out at that time. In the 2000s, we're talking deep into 996 Turbo. We're talking C6 Corvette. We're talking E46 M3.
And E39.
And E39 M5.
So although E39 debuted in the late 90s, most of its life was in the 2000s.
Same with the 996. And towards the tail end of that era, the second gen, I don't count the first gen as a great car.
Yeah.
But because the second gen is when they got their act together, but CTSV.
Yes.
Because that was out in, 2009? And we Americans were gunning down the Germans with Nürburgring lap times and all that stuff. 997 came out in that era as well. I'm trying to think of what other great cars.
I actually do have a good example because I know of several of these that are beat to within an inch of their life and shouldn't be running, but are. 7th gen Civics. Actually, I have to bring Civics back because that era. Let me pull up a photo.
Is that the one that's the SI that's in my parking garage with like the weird shifter placement?
This era.
Oh, that. Okay.
They are. I know of several of these of just people that I know that are 250,000+ miles that are just beat to within an inch of their life and are still running.
Scott Chamberlain has one. I've always appreciated that. That's kind of the last of like. Well, it's not the last of a great design because it's been its own thing.
Yep.
I think that has aged kind of okay in the SI trims. I'm not talking about normal Civics, but I really appreciate that. And then the outgoing 10th gen coupe, the Civic coupe. I still believe that the 10th gen coupe should have been the Type R. it like takes some of the crazy angular and more busy design language of the the outgoing Type R and put that on the coupe with that fastback shape. Everything's already still angular. It just feels more sporty. And design-wise, I feel like the sportiness on the hatch is definitely more forced. And it's like, you're going, this is a performance hatchback.
Well, what's funny is there's actually another Gavin that we both know that's his daily is a 10th gen coupe.
Yeah.
It's not an SI or anything like that.
It's a sport though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree. I think that would have been a much better call because I actually really like the look and design of his car.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit childish still. Like, as if we're talking about favorites of the Civic.
Yeah.
Like, it is definitely one of the more childish designs, but I think it just lends itself really well to being performance-y, Japanese. I don't know. I just like it.
Yeah, and to round out the 2010s, I mean, I was trying to think of one other car I could think of, because what's weird is in that era, as far as the American manufacturers go, you did have Cadillac, like you mentioned, doing big moves.
Yeah.
Corvette making some pretty big strides in, getting close to getting into C7.
Uh-huh.
That was around.
Well, C7 was like 2013.
That's what I'm saying, because that was around the corner. So you had,
it was.
C6 getting real loaded up, and then...
Well, the ZR1 came out in 09.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then you also had the recession. And
also, sorry to cut you off. STI and Evo too.
True.
Came out in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm. But then you also had two of the three American manufacturers that went bankrupt. So you had a lot of crap happening at the same time in the background, where the rest of GM, besides Cadillac and the Corvette and other stuff, was suffering. And you had a lot of things that kind of languished.
Yeah.
For quite a while.
Ford did not take a bailout though.
They did not. I know. People love to point that out. It makes me chuckle. But that's also at the very that 2008 to 2010 window is when Ford started to turn their corner massively.
What came out in 08 from them?
So
when did the Fiesta, just the base Fiesta, came out? What was that? 2010?
Yes, I think.
I think that was the first year, the first run. Or that's at least when they announced it. I thought it might have come out by then, but that was like Ford starting to do the World Car platform.
Yes, and that's also right around the corner of S197, because that came out in 2010. So that
the
was
facelift of S197.
Mm-hmm. That was all getting like shoehorned in the back end to get ready for Ford to do it, because like right after that was Ford dropping EcoBoost and the new 5-liter. And which
the 5-liter was, I would say, counts as 10 plus.
It is, because that dropped in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
But you had all that kind of getting loaded up. You had Dodge getting bought out by Fiat and kind of languishing for a minute in the middle of everything. Yes,
we've yet to see if that's a good thing.
Actually, you know what? That is another car I will throw in. The Dodge Charger, the rebrand, the new Dodge Charger coming back in the mid 2000s.
Okay,
because that was everywhere. Every damn cop car here in America was that.
Okay, that's interesting.
And you had them starting to rethink their brand, because they had a big heyday with the minivan, and then they kind of languished, and that was their only cash cow for a while.
As is tradition with Dodge and just the Chrysler Group.
And so they brought back the Charger and Challenger. So I think those are two that do need to be thrown in there, because those designs both started in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, that's true.
And they are pretty prevalent.
I'll give you that. I'll throw you that one.
But turning the corner, actually, 2010, just to continue on the Ford thing I started just a second ago, because that was all being like preloaded in the early 2000s.
Sure.
2010 forward, you had Ford start dropping bombs.
My car, Focus ST, the Raptor.
Focus RS.
We're talking 2010s, yeah. So all the STs. Mm-hmm. We have the Raptor. Well, the Raptor came out in 09, right?
Let me find out.
I'm pretty sure.
You're learning with us, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. Where is the Wikipedia article? Right there. 2009, yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 2009. So that dropped, as well as...
They were dropping bombs. I mean, that's when the ST Octane Academy was starting, when, when the STs were coming out. So we're talking 2015 era, 2014.
You had the Boss 302 Laguna Seca that beat the GTR around Laguna Seca.
It beat the E40 or the E90 M3.
Mm-hmm.
What GTR? They beat the Nissan GTR around Laguna Seca?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but, of course, by mere, seconds.
Well,
but,
but winning is winning.
Yeah, exactly. You had the teasing of the new GT, which wasn't until the later end of that. But
we forgot about the
we did forget about the old Ford GT. Sorry, we do have to throw that. I just realized that.
Yeah, so we kind of glossed over that.
But the new one, started getting teased as early as like 13, 14 that they were gonna do.
Okay.
The next gen one.
Okay.
And then, like shit, you had EcoBoost in general come out with Ford, which was a big thing with them.
Yeah.
You had them.
Great ad campaigns with when the Raptor came out too.
You had the S550 Mustangs in general.
Yeah.
Which to me and you, like in my opinion, is one of the first gen or first pre-facelift S550.
Yeah.
Was a fantastic design.
I think it still looks good.
It
looks way better than the facelift.
In my opinion, and in your opinion, yeah. And they drove much better. You had them ditching the live rear axle. You had them, huge moves.
Which will add collector value to the later gen S197s like the Laguna Secas and some of those GTs and stuff.
And in the 2010s, to move to Dodge real quick, you had all the Hellcat stuff start to come out.
Mm-hmm.
In the Chevy world, you had the third gen CTSV. You had the
which didn't sell. People didn't really give a shit.
No, but then you also had Corvette ZR1, C7.
Yep, which is an end of an era too, being the most powerful, quote unquote, fastest front engined Corvette.
Yep. You had
also the manual too. You could get that in a manual.
Yeah, and you had all the new crazier versions of the Camaros. Although the Camaro was released in the 2000 to 2010 era,
which is also like that was a big move for Chevy and GM to make,
bringing them back.
Yeah.
Then you had all the crazy versions of the Camaro start to come out in the 2010s.
Yeah, with the ZL1 and the yeah. Well, yeah. Well, oh shit. When did that? Because there was a 5th gen Camaro ZL1, and that probably was like 2012 or something, right?
I believe so. Chevrolet Camaro in general. Yes. Apparently, it's not loading pictures.
2010 was 5th gen. Okay.
Yeah, so it actually was entirely in this era.
Yes. I mean, as a 2010 as a model year.
Yeah.
You could buy them in 09. But
yeah, so like in this era is where so ZL1 in this first
was 13, gen. Yeah. And I drove one of those that had some bolt-ons. It was making 600 wheel. It was like real fast.
Yeah, you had a lot of that. I just mainly wanted to get through the American manufacturers because now we can move on to one of the ones I mentioned, which dropped in 2009 but carried forward, GTR.
Yeah, that was a moment.
Huge, iconic moment that really, again, although it dropped in the previous decade, really stigmatized the 2010s to 2015 era.
Well, yeah, I mean, that platform of force induction V6 dual clutch all-wheel drive
became just unanimous.
Well, yeah, unanimous is a bit strong, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that car genuinely, with its all-wheel drive setup and dual clutch, like, sure, dual clutches existed, but they weren't really in cars like that were like, oh, I can downshift in a corner and it won't upset the car. Not that we advertise doing that.
No.
But it's so technologically advanced, and it really moved the ball forward for performance cars. And the Nürburgring was famous, but it wasn't like the de facto like Nürburgring lap time of like, oh, well, did you read about this car that beat this other car on the Nürburgring? Like, that wasn't part of the lexicon, really. That wasn't part of our automotive car culture, at least from what I saw. And granted, when the GTR dropped, I was 16.
Yeah.
So there is that. And 16 years old, not in the current era where everything is so accessible to everybody, but you kind of had to like find stuff out back then still.
Yeah, it was very mid-internet era. It hadn't really come full circle with social media and everything yet.
100%. So the GTR put the Nürburgring on the map for a lot of people. Hearing a Nissan beat a 997 Turbo on the ring is like, holy shit, like, wow, what is this?
What?
Granted, it's devoid of any sort of real sensations, unless if you count the rear differential noise as a sensation.
Or the transmission going kaput.
Yeah. On the early cars, doing a launch. Yeah.
So there was that. This is also the era, which is another thing that's kind of near and dear to my heart, where the Koreans started to turn the corner. Because right in that era where the
end of that era, but yeah.
No, I'm talking even the earlier part is where it began, because you had the new Optimas come out in around 2012. They're complete like redesign where they actually where they actually started to look good. They hadn't completely carried everything forward, but the seeds that were planted then are what led to later with Stinger, Veloster N, things like that.
Things that came out towards the end of the 2010s, because Stinger was the tail end of 2017.
Yep, 18 model year, yeah.
And then what was Hyundai doing? They weren't doing anything great at that time. I mean, if you walk that back, back to the mid 2000s, they were making the Tiburon, the Santa Fe, the Tucson, the Hyundai. What else were they doing? The Veloster hadn't come out,
so they did make the Genesis Coupe and the Genesis.
They did do that.
Okay, so they did that, and they did the Genesis luxury car. They had those
Genesis. Genesis wasn't a company yet.
Yeah, so they had those two under the Hyundai umbrella, and then I believe I'm going to fact check.
Well, the Equus too.
The Equus as well. I'm going to actually pull up, because this is another thing that I need to learn, is exactly when... Okay, so Genesis, the company, was officially launched in 2015.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure when that transition happened, because they kind of botched that. There was a lot of teething issues and misbranding and like confusion about multiple things named the Genesis.
Well, look at the Volkswagen Phaeton. People didn't want to spend $80,000 on a Volkswagen.
So what they did was right, as in moving it to another company. That made sense. It's just the way they did it, and
took a while.
And the fact that multiple things were named Genesis is just add to the confusion. But that launched, and that was a big move for Hyundai. That has, I would say, at this point, started to pay off. Their new designs are fantastic.
I mean, everyone's talking about the new the 74.
Yes, actually. Let's pause that for just a second and finish this out.
Let's
finish out the 2010s, because then we'll use that to move on into the current. Trying to think of just what else to slam in there. I mean, from Audi, you did have all the new 4-liter turbo shit.
Well, okay, and those are great cars, but if we want to walk this back to the 2000s, the R8,
RS4,
not as iconic. Great car, but not iconic.
Yep.
Also, iconic design, the TT.
Yes. You did also have the E90 M3. You mentioned that earlier.
I mentioned E46 earlier.
Yeah.
The E90 and the E92 being the last of BMW M products feeling like themselves. And before they started to get kind of awkward with, going back to turbo straight sixes and bigger cars and really heavily assisted E-Pass and leaning more towards the lawyer or doctor that takes it to work, rather than the enthusiast that is taking it to track days. Let's
see. You had this was also the era which bleeds in just before 2010 and after mainly. You have Jag making a lot of its big moves that it did.
Well, they got acquired by Tata. JLR in general.
Yeah, and you had a lot of people naturally worried about that. But then Jag itself really started to come out with, like, for instance, the F-Type. The F-Type was a big launch.
Well, if we're talking about seeds that get planted earlier, I mean, when Jag got acquired by Tata, the XF came out, which is still a really great-looking car.
It is. You had the XF. You had the new generation of the
XJ.
Yes.
Those still look... I mean, they haven't changed the design in 10 years or 15 years, but they look good.
You had the big new long wheelbases XJs where, Jeremy Clarkson races the sun, with one of those. You have the XF, which wasn't nearly as popular, but was still kind of a cool
It's still a great,
design.
Solid contender for a sports sedan.
Because prior to that, they had been making platforms that had been around since the early 90s.
Yeah.
And so that was a big refresh with the new 5-liter supercharged stuff they started throwing and everything. And
they're still using to this day.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what else could be thrown into that pot.
Into the 2010s? Or is that what we're talking about still?
458?
I mean, 458 and Aventador. Huracan came out in 13 or 14. I think 458 is a more indicative representation of that, because that really was a new chapter being turned over for Ferrari. They had been, obviously working on reliability issues, and the dual clutch really helps with that.
Yeah.
Those engines were already stout. I mean, it's a new engine for the 458, but That mixed with, the lack of turbos. And I've just like where that car sits of past, present, and future regarding that era.
Yep.
It was before the turbos. It was before they got too over-designed. They hadn't received the haptic feedback stuff. That was actually a new chapter for their interiors in general. They really did a huge just internal generational jump. They really left the 90s at that point because the 360 and the 430 were so little.
Yeah.
And then the 458, they jumped forward a bunch while still maintaining the Manatino switch.
Mm-hmm.
You lost any manuals, which sucks.
That's a lot of companies in the 2010s.
I mean, yeah, Lamborghini had already... the last gated manual Gallardo was the Balboni, wasn't it?
I think so.
And that was...
late 2000, so like 8-ish.
Are you sure? I feel like that bled into 2010. Maybe. It's either 09 or 10. 10.
So it is 10 exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was the last official one.
Mhm.
But then you even had actually both of the Golf Rs.
As 10s? There wasn't because it started Mark 6 and Mark 5. The last year of Mark 5 was 09.
And that was R32, and switching to Golf R after that.
Yeah.
So you went, into...
I just don't give a fuck about the Mark 6 Golf R. I just don't.
I would say its real legacy is planting the seeds for what became the Mark 7.
Yeah, it just has the worst of both worlds, really. It has like a so-so manual.
So
it doesn't
interior.
Mark 6 over Mark 5 interior every day.
Yeah.
But it has, it's the first year of losing the VR6
Yep.
for a really emotionless 2-liter turbo. It's effective, I suppose, but you don't get the power gains of Mark 6 platform that you do in Mark 7 platform.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like, okay, I have 20 grand. Can I get a Golf R? I guess so. Like, I don't know. I don't really care.
I know you don't, but I know a shit ton of people that do. Because that it's similar to the way that you think about your Fiesta. Someone looks at that as being like, it's all-wheel drive, it's slightly bigger, I can get it in a 4-door, it can fit people, it gets decent mileage, I can make power with it.
Yeah.
It's relatively cheap.
It feels like more of a compromise.
Yeah, and I agree. That's why.
Whereas
I'm saying,
like the Fiesta is like more of a dedication to like, let's go have some fun driving.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I think the Mark 6 was more, the guinea pig, which became the Mark 7, considering there's a lot of platform sharing between the two. And then Mark 7 really just took that ball and carried it forward. I
mean, I would say is if we're talking about best Volkswagens period, I would say Mark 1 GTI is a standout for just being like Genesis for all of the hot hatches to ever come after it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Mark 4 R32.
Yep.
And then Mark 7.5 DSG. And then everything else, just forget it exists. That's my personal opinion on it, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm just going through, still just kind of trying to finalize the 2010 era.
Well, if we're talking about that, it started off with the last of the 997 RS 4.0.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very possibly one of the best driver's cars to ever be built.
And then we go into 991.
And then we get into 991. That started off with teething issues. They had engines catch fire. 458 had engines catch fire too. If we're talking 2010 still, I mentioned Aventador, which is just now being phased out, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that is kind of how Lamborghini works.
Remind me, when did the LFA come out?
It's either 09 or 10.
I know. That was right in that era as well.
And that took forever to be built.
Yes.
12.
Okay. So that is solidly in this era.
Oh, model years, 2011 to 13. So yeah.
So
production of 10. Or December of 10.
Yeah, so model years 11 through 13, so that's solidly in this era. And that was an iconic Japanese car.
100%.
But, very, very iconic.
That and then the NC1 NSX.
Yep. And then you had...
which is a baby 918. And also 918. Oh, well, the hypercar wars. The LaFerrari, the P1, and the 918.
And you also had the BRZ FRS in 86.
On the complete opposite end of that spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was just thinking Japanese still, like those ones.
Yeah.
You had, and really towards the mid-end, ND Miata.
ND came out in 15.
Yep.
So NC... Yeah.
Well, yeah, you had a Miata in there, and then you had the ND, which went back to basics.
The ND Miata, I mean, people have acknowledged it, and not to say it gets slept on, but the fact that a corporate company as large as Mazda, they're not Ford or Toyota,
but they're big.
But they are big. They were able to put their foot down and say, we need to go backwards. We need to lose weight. We'll lose some power for at least a little while, but shrink both the size and the weight, and still the fact that they're able to maintain a level of civility and just like niceness inside while still losing that weight still astonishes me.
It's crazy, yeah, because it also is not. It's also still bigger than an NA.
It is
slightly,
yeah.
Not by much.
Yeah,
but it's smaller than an NC, bigger than an NA, but still very lightweight.
They went back to the same weight as the NA.
Yeah,
right. So
yeah,
relative with give or take a couple pounds,
which is just
also
nuts.
a 5% drivetrain loss,
which is blows your mind.
Yeah. Did you know that before?
I did.
Okay.
I know that they put a lot of work into that transmission and drivetrain to make sure that it retained.
And well, that helps us here at altitude too. We'll take everything we can get.
So you had,
and then you also had just a continuation of just the stupid fast supercars. You know, if we're talking 2010s, the 991 Turbo, which is still a fantastic daily driver. You have McLaren.
I was actually just going to say McLaren,
Yeah.
and their whole rebirth happened then.
In 10, didn't it? Or 09.
Yeah, with the
12C.
with the washing machine model number.
Yes.
With the MP4 12C. You had like their whole rebirth. Yeah, 2011. Yeah, where they just kind of blew everything away with their chassis dynamics, mainly with their crazy active stuff.
Well, yeah, but you don't need a sway bar.
Which is, again, mind-blowing. You know, like seeing the Top Gear bit of Jeremy just going over the bump on the third to last corner of their track and just being like, it didn't even face it.
Nothing.
Yeah. And I've been fortunate enough to ride in one of those. And yeah, I was kind of like, what is even happening? It's such a weird feeling to see, oh, there's a bump, and then just, okay, did we even hit a bump? I don't know.
Take that, and that is basically the C8 Corvette.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But, like, clearly we know that era really well, and I think we've probably covered, most of, like, what really would define era.
All of the crazy fast McLarens, we're talking Aventadors and, like, SVJ. Well, yeah, that was in 19 still. Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, you've been aware about cars probably for at least a little while.
But I want to circle back to something you mentioned a bit ago when we were talking about Hyundai, which is some of the new stuff that just got released or just got announced. So we've mentioned a couple times, both in our videos as well as on the podcast, that we're in kind of a bit of a gray area when it comes to automotive stuff right now, because we're looking at the electric revolution coming, but it's not quite here yet. Hybrids have been a thing for a while, but they're kind of questionable. Anyways, there's a lot of transitioning going on right here. And
it's both a great time to be a car enthusiast and a terrible time to be a car enthusiast, depending on what perspective you have.
Yeah. So one of the things that's coming out, that has been announced that Hyundai, as of all people, has been in development of for what they say is about 7 years at this point, is their Envision 74 concept, which is kind of crazy. They basically took a car that they had
the Pony.
The Pony.
I love those wheels too. Those are great.
So they took that car and used that body to kind of develop a new powertrain, because they're trying to. There was basically two goals of this project from everything I've read on it. Number one was range, because that's one problem electric cars still have, especially performance electric cars. The second problem is, okay, hybrids are kind of a thing of the past right now. Plug-in hybrids are kind of the new in vogue thing at the moment.
Yeah.
But even that
won't last.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really sustainable. It was more or less just, we'll add a bit more battery and a plug.
Yeah.
But they were trying to envision what's the gap to bridge. And they figured it was hydrogen, which has been done before. That's nothing new, having hydrogen-powered things.
That was in the Who Killed the Electric Car movie. That was made in 2006 about something that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s.
So we had them thinking about what could we do, and thinking, okay, if we do a mid-size battery pack and a mid-size hydrogen tank and fuel cell, we can kind of have the best of all worlds, where fast charging the battery pack only takes 20 minutes.
So I haven't done any reading actually about this. I've only just seen photos.
Okay, so basically, it's pretty cool. It like their announcements and what they have announced is really cool. It's effectively, it almost looks like the merger of a DeLorean and a bunch of other stuff in one. It's a really rad.
Which is a car we didn't talk about for the 80s, by the way, but that was absolutely iconic for that time.
Yeah. So it's definitely got some rad styling throwbacks, which is awesome, and I think they did a fantastic job with that. And the cool side note is that this thing does actually run and drive. It's not just a concept. It is actually a legit prototype that functions. And in kind of identifying hydrogen electric as being a good bridge to a gap and whatnot between the two worlds, and wanting to shoot for a higher range target while making things easy. Hydrogen fills quick because it's just a pressurized tank, just like
Yes, however, there are issues with the infrastructure of that, and the filling stations, they need to pressurize to over 10,000 psi into one tank to then let it go into the next tank. There are infrastructure issues. With that. It's not easy. No, and just because water is plentiful doesn't mean hydrogen is.
Exactly. So this is still just a dream, but being that those were the two goals, it effectively has, you could fill up both your hydrogen and your electric theoretically in 20 minutes.
So for those that haven't actually read the articles and that have only seen them photos on Instagram, like myself, hydrogen fuel tank that can be refilled in about 5 minutes, if the thing works, and a 62.4 kilowatt hour battery pack, and that is actually run on an 800 volt fast charging infrastructure, or I guess frame,
compatible with all basically current fast charging networks.
Well, so the Taycan and the RS e-tron are the ones that can really utilize the 800 volt system best.
Yep.
Teslas aren't even at that. Yeah, I don't think the Plaid is at that yet. I think they're still like 300.
Yeah, but so they're kind of trying to build it both for what's compatible now and looking forward. Basically, it has it's rear-wheel drive. It has two rear-mounted motors to work with that battery pack. The hydrogen fuel cell is built in underneath, and that also generates its own electricity to assist the motors and things of that nature. It's got a split tank for packaging reasons. It makes, and I'm trying to find it in this article, which they don't say, it makes almost 600 horsepower.
Okay.
So no.
Is that a combined output?
Yes.
Okay.
Combined output.
671.
Yeah.
Here, click on that. Just want to see if there's anything else. Also, for those listening, if you hear someone smacking their lips, it's always Justin.
It's usually me.
Yeah.
And.
Okay, 674 horsepower. Go up. Hydrogen fuel. Okay. Yeah, I mean, clearly a Giorgetto Giugiaro design. Yeah.
And
that, I mean, this is great to see. That will not be built.
I know. No, I know. The reason they're building this is to make future tech, not to build
this
car.
Is definitely a showcase. I mean, this is the Tesla Roadster, factor where, build something that looks great, is exciting. I mean, the Roadster got built, but this is just a showcase what could be possible with this sort of tech.
Yeah. Okay. So here you go. Charging at 800 volts. It's charged from 10 to 80% in under 18 minutes.
It is only a 62.4 kilowatt hour. So, I mean, that's not nothing, but it's also not like the 100 plus.
And that was on purpose because the other thing is keeping weight down so they can make it fast and not chew through its own battery, because then you also have the hydrogen fuel cell with a maximum output of 95 kilowatts. And then, so you just keep going, and it's really cool. It ticks a lot of boxes that make me fairly excited for the future of like, okay, let's take this powertrain, put it in stuff. It's more, I view this as kind of the powertrain that could help us get to where electric is sustainable and good, because this is, as long as some basic infrastructure is updated, more sustainable than internal combustion, less emissions and things like that, not to having charging anxiety as well, nearly as much as like trying to transition to electric cars at this point.
And I don't know. My perspective at this point is issues and our troubles have less to do with our the range of these cars putting out, and more to do really like we have a fucking problem with our charging networks right now. And sure, there are charging stations that are becoming more prevalent, but we have problems with them even taking credit card payments, like really basic stuff that limits people from actually being able to get places, and charging availability, and even down the road when like that stuff gets fixed, like what's going to happen in the summertime when like the hot places like Los Angeles or Phoenix, Tucson, everyone's running their ACs, everyone has an electric car, there's not enough power.
Yeah, and that's a problem that we're still figuring out, which is why I view something like this as good, because of the fact that this, with a hydrogen fuel cell like it has,
which
isn't completely dependent on just the power.
Did you listen to Zach Clapman's experience? He had the Toyota hydrogen car that came out.
I know what you're talking about. I don't know what it's called. The Mirai.
Was
I
it
think
the Mirai? Has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was stranded for like 48 hours, like in between Los Angeles and where was it? I'm trying to think. I don't know, but like issues, and like he's not the only person to have had that problem.
Oh, I'm sure. Again, I'm viewing this as the best gap filler, not as like this is something to stick with and like really go for.
Sure, and the issues that we're having is more at the corporate level of people paying attention or companies paying attention to what's actually going on and responding to pumps or stations that are not working.
Yeah, and I don't know. It'll be interesting to me, it's really interesting that Hyundai is continuing on this trend, and they've also come out with several, Hyundai Kia specifically, with like really good electric vehicles that have done some really good work.
The new EV6,
the EV6, and the Hyundai Ioniq 5.
That, and then also Genesis has the GV60. Is that what that is? That's the electric one?
I believe so. Yes. But they're really starting to pump out their stuff, and so it's making I actually mentioned this in the video that will be forthcoming with the NSX. A portion of the NC1 made me really excited for the future, and looking at this stuff and having had that experience, which you'll hear more once the video's out, and stuff like that, makes me really excited for the future, where we can kind of meld a bunch of different worlds together, and the better we do that, it can still, create a good experience while hopefully continuing to be more sustainable. Because part of the reason that things are a little dull right now is simply because we're in the middle of, as we mentioned earlier, a transition phase. And in a transition phase, you kind of get the worst of both worlds in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and for us car enthusiasts and fun havers, the other problem with electric cars, other than the fact that they don't make sound and they make all their torque at zero, is everyone, for better or worse, is using the skateboard platform.
Yep.
Which is, by the way, not a thing that Elon did.
No.
That's just been around since the 90s. Using a skateboard platform, and they all just kind of drive the same. And that just comes from all the weight being at the floor, at the bottom. And I've actually heard, the only person I've heard say this, and I think it would be interesting, it won't be done, I don't think, but I think would be interesting. Paul Schmucker on Everyday Driver, he's mentioned that if you, instead of having just a skateboard platform for the battery pack and like layer shit on top of itself and clump that mass either at the front or in the middle or at the back for sports car, havers or sports car owners. I can't speak today. That would at least be a way to make cars drive differently, and you can change the packaging in different ways, and custom tailor it still, I'm sure, at the design point. But having cars have their own identity still while also being electric, it would be interesting to see.
Well, now those kind of dynamics that would produce would be something we're already used to. Like, for instance, we're already used to having a 400-pound engine up front or things like that. So that could also potentially make it very easy for an automaker to create a drivetrain to swap in there.
True. That is true. I'm curious to see how long it will take to get technology to a point where we could have a sports car, like, a curve, like a sports car with a curve weight of like 3,000 pounds
And electric.
Because at this point, all of the stuff that's coming out now is like 4,000, 4,500, 5,000. I think is the 100D like a 5,000 pound car or something like that. I know the Lucid is at least 5,000.
Yeah, they're all heavy mainly just because our battery tech, as far as energy density is concerned, is way beyond what gasoline offers.
Right.
And it's improved, yes, but it's not nearly there yet.
It's not great. So, yeah, that will be interesting. And it'll be what I'm also interested to see is who's going to be the first one to do that.
You know what? Fuck it. Let's skip all this shit and just make mini nuclear generators for cars. Fuck it. Let's skip everything.
Ford did that, I think, back in the day.
Yeah. So, yeah, Ford did that, and even Chrysler had the turbine car.
Yeah.
Which is...
Well, Ford had a nuclear-powered car.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, let's not actually do that.
No.
Please don't. We don't need nuclear radiation every time somebody crashes.
For so many reasons. Oh, my God, yes. But... yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. Like, well, because Mazda's been so gung ho on being, lightweight.
Yep.
Are they going to do it, or like is Porsche, going to need to? I mean, they're already in the works to create the next gen Cayman is going to be electric, apparently, or electrified in some sort of way. People are worried. Well, there's I don't know what it's called, but there's like the 718 platform car that is 100% electric. That it's like currently it's a race car, but knowing how things go. That will probably homologate to his road car.
Yeah, we have so many of the companies that have announced that, this is the last. I mean, for instance, STI is also another one where it's like, this is the last internal combustion one where if we're going to bring this name back, we're going to do something different. Because they kind of know they have to, but I have a feeling these next two generations of cars will have a lot of compromises.
Yeah.
And I think it'll probably be the third generation after that, we'll say 30 years from now, that will start to have ironed all that out, hopefully.
So this is Sunday, July 17th of 2022. So we're watermarking this.
2052.
2052 by July 17th of 2052.
I'm hoping so, and looking at how technology has progressed, I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah, probably.
Because I do think probably the next 10 years will be pretty painful.
Yeah.
I think that the 10 years after that will be, okay, I see where you're going. I think that the 10 years after that is where things will be like, okay, our battery density's, doubled, so we have double the power for half the size.
Yeah.
That type of shit. And I think that's really the key. The two main keys that we're having problems with. We have motors that can do fantastic things electrically. That's not the problem. It's entirely down to how much energy can we store in a place and how much weight that is and how can we charge it. That's really our problems in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Because that's a problem the whole world is suffering as, it's not just the car problem. It's like how many people charge phones. You think about how many people charge a phone every night and how much fucking electricity that takes compared to 20 years ago that wasn't a thing.
Oh my God. Yeah.
All these things have added up to where, ironically, now our life is more electrified than ever, and trying to move cars into that is even more difficult considering we're comfortable with AC and all this other shit.
Right.
It is a massive compounding problem that's far beyond cars.
Yes.
And also, I mean, there's good things that cause that problem as well, like trying to move away from coal. Like, we should be moving away from coal, but that also caused a shortage in a way.
Yeah.
Of electrical power as we're trying to find better ways.
Mm-hmm. I
like
mean,
I said,
I'm still team nuclear, but
no, I am too.
Yeah.
I think that having done plenty of my own research from legitimate sources, where
Karen.
No, I'm saying legitimate sources from not some dude writing on the internet about this and that. It's like, no, like actual companies with field research and legitimate shit like that. The grand total that you can count on one hand amount of nuclear disasters we've had in the last little while, last 40 years, we've learned those lessons. One of them, namely Chernobyl, was entirely preventable.
What was the one in New Jersey?
New Jersey.
17?
I can't remember the name of it, but yes.
There was one that happened around a similar era.
Yeah, and then like Fukushima, we've learned the lessons from that. That was entirely down to we had preventative measures that just weren't effective.
Was that the one like in 2011?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was the earthquake, then tsunami that compounded that, which there were safety measures for, but there were small failures that led to bigger failures that caused that. Again, lessons we've already learned, but like overall, nuclear is the safest bet that, as long as it's controlled, has effectively no downsides. The only downside it does have is figuring out what to do with the waste after the fuel rods are spent.
Yep.
But there's already breakthroughs that have come in the past couple years that might be able to solve those things.
Well, and we have a similar problem or potential issue with battery packs and with electric cars and like stuff like in our phones. Like we can recycle and like try to reuse as much as possible, but like not 100%.
At the moment, that's extraordinarily expensive and not foolproof.
Right.
It's both extremely costly, and it doesn't actually fully get recycled.
Yeah.
It just, we properly dispose of it effectively and call it recycling at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all the shit that needs to be figured out for us to like make it forward.
Okay, so by this time next week, we're going to come up with the solution for everything, for the world's problems.
Give me about 20 gallons of coffee and maybe.
Okay, cool. Get right on it. I don't know. Is there anything else that we feel like we want to talk about?
That's kind of where I wanted to round it out, to be honest.
All right, cool. Next time, and I'm gonna put a little bit of thought into this. I want to build us a Franken car. I want to. I want to do like a call and response between me and you. So you think of the things that you want to put into a dream car, or not a dream car, but a like the ultimate, Frankenstein vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
I'll think about mine, and then you and I have to sit like back and forth. We'll trade punches back and forth and see what kind of monstrosity we come up with. So stay tuned for that next time. If you have any Track Daily Crush ideas, any topics of discussion that you would like us to talk about, even like beyond cars, even like that would be kind of neat too to kind of break out of that. That will be it. Next week or this upcoming week, I will be in Idaho, as previously stated. So if you want to see uploads or like photos or videos or whatever, head on to gp.media and I'll post them on my stories. Probably make them over to my personal account too. If you give a shit about like my film photography, GP__film is where you'll find that stuff. Justin, you don't really have anything to promote, really?
Not necessarily. If you are local and feel like getting detailing done, Chaos Theory is my detailing business. I don't necessarily post social shit that often. I don't. It's never done returns for me, and it's just not the core of my business.
Sure.
So like I have a website, chaostheoryutah.com. Like all that stuff's pretty readily available. If you search Chaos Theory, I'm gonna be the only thing that comes up anyways.
Sure.
Utah. So that's really the only thing I have to honestly promote.
Cool. Well, and we also have merch still. We have hats, shirts, stickers, etc. Head on over to exhibitionofspeed.com. We might need to do another photo shoot too, just to promote stuff like on the gram. I'll take some stuff in Sun Valley. Actually, that'll be good.
Yes, I think that'll be great.
That'll be really cool. All right, cool. Well, until next time, I've been Gavin,
and I've been Justin,
and this has been the Exhibition of Speed podcast. Goodbye.